Thank you, Polly. The Clinical Entrepreneur Programme prep session. So gosh, well done for being here. Very excited. Love having your cameras on. You don't have to have them on at all. You can do whatever you want, but we love it when you've got your cameras on. It's great to see who's out there. Well done, well done. Well done, John. Are you driving at the same time? I'm very impressed. And camera on. Yeah.
Impressed and terrified in equal measure.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, lovely to see you all. Very entrepreneurial. It's lovely to see you guys. I'm Tamsin. I'm Holland Brown. I'm a paediatrician. I also applied to be on the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme like you guys several years ago and had an innovation, but actually really recently I've joined the team that deliver, and you'll realise that there are quite a few entrepreneurs who are given opportunities on the programme and outside the programme. There are multiple opportunities. So I took up one of those opportunities and have joined the team delivering the programme. Polly, who you can see, I'll let her introduce herself. Polly is actually been a founding member. So the programme was started by Tony Young, but Polly actually was part of the team putting it together in year one, and you probably know you're applying for cohort 8, which means that there are over 1,000 of you, and everybody is extraordinary. It's an amazing group, and you learn so much from being there, and it's a real tonic to all be together. So it's really exciting to see new people who might be joining this year. Polly, did you want to say hi?
Hello everyone, I'm Polly. As Tamsin said, I've been working here since for 7 years on the programme, and I'm programme lead. So and we're also joined by one of our year 1 cohorters delivering this session alongside Tamsin, and that's Harry. So Harry, you can do the next introduction.
Sure, I can take it from here. So nice to see you all, and definitely, John, please drive safely. It's making me really nervous just seeing stuff go past in the window. I am gonna deliver the session. I'm just doing a battle with Zoom. Bear with me. I want to share my screen. There we go. Let me share that.
While you're sharing, Harry, shall I just say, it's like you're all very welcome to either introduce yourselves in the chat if you're feeling brave enough, or putting questions in the chat. We love that, or put emojis or whatever. So feel like you can be interactive. Sorry, Harry, carry on.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Tamsin. And please do, ideally, this session works a lot better, I think, if it is super interactive. Let's talk about some of your questions. Let's talk about some of your problems, some of your ideas that you wanted to bring on the programme, all of that. So yeah, happy to chat away, and both Tamsin and Polly will tell you I talk too much in general. So it'd be much better to hear your voices, and we hopefully, as I say, make it super interactive. But yeah, so I'm going to give the session today on knowing your innovation or researching your innovation. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. So I'm Harry, as Polly said, one of the year 1 clinical entrepreneurs. I've been causing mischief and bothering Polly for the last 7 or 8 years now, which is starting to make me feel old. But I'm a doctor by background, so I trained did my core surgical training, during which got really excited by technology and how we could use that to help patients. So much to the disgust of my supervisors and my mum and my wife, turned down my registrar post and went into the world of digital health and innovation about 8 and a bit years ago now. Was lucky enough to meet Tony Young, who had just announced at that time the formation of the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme. Joined the programme in year 1 as one of the entrepreneurs appointed, and then now kind of mentor on the programme a bit, and occasionally get wheeled out to do workshops like this one and another one on Lean Canvas. In terms of my experience in innovation, most of my time on the programme was working with a company called My Health, which make digital therapeutic apps. So it's apps that help people look after themselves better, and they were focused around chronic conditions like COPD and diabetes. and yeah, oversaw rolling those out across the country, but also designed my own app, which is called MyOp, which was helping patients get ready for surgery, so rehabilitation. So I took that from idea through to it being live at market, securing grant funding to roll it out across 3 hospital sites. About a year and a half ago, I left my Health and joined AirLogic, which is probably the largest specialist health tech consultancy in the UK. Our teams deliver all sorts of stuff for the NHS, like the vaccination programme, electronic prescribing, do a lot of work around interoperability, spine, mesh, and all of those good things. And I lead the operations team. So that's me. Let me go on to the next slide. So what we're going to talk about today, I think the main aim of this talk is to help you guys start to think a little bit more deeply, I guess, around your innovation, and hopefully give you the best chance of a successful application. I think one of the pitfalls that we often see is people maybe have an idea, but they haven't really done the research into that idea. They haven't really understood, has somebody else already done it? What are the impacts? What are the key challenges? And really what I hope to do with this session is to give you like some tools which you can use to think a little bit more deeply, maybe a few pointers on where you could start with your innovation, and then hopefully lots of time at the end for a bit of a Q&A. Some stuff I'm going to talk through to give us a bit of a framework to hang our thoughts around. I'm going to talk through a little bit of something called the Lean Startup, which some of you may have heard of, but we'll talk about that at a high level. And then we'll do a bit of a deep dive into your problem that you're trying to solve, your customers and users, and the differences between those, thinking about your solution and creating a value proposition. And as I say, finish with hopefully some pointers on turning some of those thoughts into action and things that you can take away and start doing. I can't see the chat, Tamsin and Polly, so do just interrupt me and shout if someone's got a question relevant to something I'm talking about. Very happy to pause and take questions as we go along. If not, certainly we could do some at the end. So Lean Startup. So most of you, I hope, or many of you, I think, will have heard of Lean. That's something which came out of Toyota and turned them from a struggling car company, which was getting completely out-competed by big American manufacturers, into one of the biggest names in car manufacturing today. And the way they did that is through using Lean principles, which is all about reducing waste and doing things in the most efficient manner that you possibly can. There's a guy called Eric Ries who took those principles and then tried to apply them in the startup world. And thinking about what is waste within a startup, waste is spending time, effort, resources, money on building stuff that people don't want, right? So how can we always make sure that all of our activities are helping us to build stuff that people want and need, rather than spending lots of money developing an app, for example, which isn't really solving a problem for anyone, and therefore no one buys it or uses it, right? So it's a kind of a quasi-scientific approach to exploring problems and then their solutions, I think is the best way to describe it. It's a brilliant book. I would highly recommend anyone who's got entrepreneurial aspirations of any kind, regardless of if you apply or get onto the program or not. I'd recommend reading it. It's a really fantastic book. Running Lean, which I've put up there, is a kind of a follow-on, if you like, but written by Ash Moira, and it's more like a step-by-step, play-by-play and guide to how you then enact some of the principles and theories which are introduced in the Lean Startup. And that's where this idea comes from. This is quite a busy slide. I'm not going to talk about it. I do, as I say, a workshop on Lean Canvas where we do a bit more of a deep dive into some of these bits, but I just wanted to put this out there to start stimulating some of your thinking and to introduce some of the principles. So you see, starting in the top left, the absolute first thing that you need to do is to understand the customer problem. And often people gloss over that because they get really excited about the second step and think like, I've got this wonderful idea, I'm going to build this thing, it's going to do X, Y, and Z, it's going to be amazing. But they haven't spent the time to really deeply understand the customer problem. And I think particularly on the clinical entrepreneur program, that should be one of our key strengths, right? Well, I'm guessing many of you will be clinicians who have first-hand experience of really sizable problems, and that insight into the problem is the bedrock on which everything else is built, right? It's so important that you really understand it. What is the problem? Who has that problem? And really, say, do a deep dive into that. And we're going to talk about that a lot more later in the session. Then coming into designing a solution. So I think that if I build this, it will solve that problem. But then quickly moving on to looking more holistically about your business model, which is the lean canvas, which I'll show on the next slide. Once you've done that, then this is where the kind of quasi-scientific bit comes in. Find out where your biggest assumptions are. So where are the things, your biggest risks, the biggest things which are going to derail your progress if you get it wrong. Usually that starts, as I said, with the customer problem, right? Have I really understood that? But the aim is that you essentially write a bit of a hypothesis. So I think that these people are having this problem because of this situation, right? And then you've got to go out and try and validate that. So if you're at that stage, maybe you can build a prototype product. If you're really early stage, that might be going out and doing some research, but write a hypothesis, prove it or disprove it, right? As you would in a research project, whatever you're doing. But and then get the learnings from that, and then come back again and find what's your next biggest risk, right? If you've managed to completely show that what you thought was your hypothesis, that if I build X, it will solve this problem, for example, then maybe you need to go back to the drawing board and pivot, find a new problem or find a new solution. If that's positive, then you move on to the next biggest risk. And only when you've got it perfect are you then ready to go out into the big bad world and really try and start scaling up your business. I think that's probably all I'm going to say on this slide for now. I won't go into problem, solution fit, product market fit. I think that's probably a little bit beyond the scope of this session. But let's see, if people are interested, we can always chat about that towards the end. But anyway, so I guess I just wanted to introduce those high-level principles and why it's so important that we spend the time researching and validating our assumptions, because if you're going to ever have success and build something which people want and need and scales massively and has a lot of people using it, then getting those basics right is absolutely critical.
And Harry, I wonder if it's helpful to say at this point that because we have a real spectrum of people applying. So some people are very, very early stage. And so it is an idea, and you might be like what Harry's describing there as getting some of that research to back up your idea would be helpful when you're applying for the programme. But we appreciate that some of that might be, if it's a really good idea, then sometimes it's about what you already know is out there, and that researching, as in researching what solutions might work and why your solution would work. So it's just about backing it up, I guess. But
absolutely.
Yeah, this is wonderful, this bit. Thanks with this lovely lean canvas bit. This bit I find valuable, and however many times I do it. So this is a really nice exercise to do that Harry's going to take you through now.
Yeah, you'll be sick of hearing it, Tamsin. I expect of you being far too polite. But I think you're entirely right. I guess let's say we do follow-on sessions where we'll go into a lot more detail into the whole picture. I think where I'm going to try and focus us today is, to Tamsin's point, one, have you understood your problem, right? Two, have you understood your customer segments, and we'll talk about that in a lot more detail. And then number 4 there, have you identified a solution to that problem, right? And again, can you link those two things together? I think those bits, that speaks to your passion, and ideally looking for someone who's passionate about the problem, right, that they're trying to solve. You may not know, right, your revenue streams and your cost structures, and you may not quite know what your channels are, which is your route to market, how you're going to go out there and tell people. That's okay, right? But do know your problem, do know your customers, do have an idea as to what the solution would be to those problems. And the bit which is probably not represented that well, specifically within the Lean Canvas, is understanding the market a little bit. Like, how big is that problem? If you were to solve it, what would the impact be? And potentially, has anyone else already done it? Right? Who are your competitors out there, and how they solve the problem? I think those are the key bits which we're going to talk about in more detail. But yeah, it's a really good exercise to do just generally, but if you are going to apply, maybe starting to sketch out one of these Lean Canvas, at least putting some bullet points in it, might get you thinking more holistically about your problem that you're trying to solve, and your solution, and some of those other factors which you may not have immediately considered. Okay, so as I say, let's spend a little bit of time talking about problem, customer, solution. So you're going to get bored of me saying this. I think number 1 is to fall in love with the problem, right? If you really passionately care about the problem and you really deeply understand it, that's going to shine through in your application. I guess some points around problem. First one, ask yourself, is it a must-have or a nice-to-have? Now, if you're going to have great success and get a lot of people really wanting to engage with your product or service, or not-for-profit initiative which you're proposing, then you've got a much greater chance of success if it's a must-have problem, right? It's something that people can't survive without solving, right? If it's a must-have problem, that usually means that people will be solving it in some manner already. So another good thing to think about with a problem is, what are the existing alternatives? What are the ways that people currently solve that problem? Is it a manual workaround? Do they have to, I don't know, make lots of notes on paper to keep reminders? I mean, I don't know what it is, depends what the problem is, but there will be, for most must-have problems, there will be an existing solution. So understand that too, right? And the limits of that, the limitations of that existing solution, because then that starts to show you your area that you could massively improve, right? So spending a lot of time really understanding the problem, and in order to do that, you need to understand who is it a problem for. And that's where, for this end, developing a profound appreciation of your customers and users. So often when I speak to people who are fairly, at the start of the entrepreneurial journey, they might tell me like their customers are doctors, for example, very broad brush, but they haven't really spent the time to understand, okay, well, what type of doctors, and are they customers or are they users? And it's a really important distinction. A customer is someone who pays for your product. A user is someone who uses it. Often in healthcare, they are not the same person, right? If I'm developing something and I've got aspirations to sell it to the NHS, then maybe my customer is a commissioner, or maybe they're the chief financial officer of the acute trust, whatever it might be. Whereas my users might be patients, or maybe I've also got another group of users who are doctors. Now, in order for your solution to be successful, I think you need to be solving problems for both your customers and users. But often they might have different problems. So if I put to give you an example, when I was designing and developing my op, My customers would probably be acute trusts. They've got a lot of problems with waiting lists. They want to get maximum efficiency out of their operating theatres. They also want to get people out of the hospital and back into the community as quickly as they can. So they want to reduce length of stay, right? That's one group of problems for my customers. My users, on the other hand, I've got primary user was patients. So what are their problems? Well, they're often quite fearful of their operation and don't really understand what's happening to them. They're worried about getting back to work and complications and so on. And I've got another group of users who are the healthcare professionals who'll be using the platform. What are their problems, right? So you can see that if you're doing this kind of deep dive into falling in love with the problems that you're trying to solve, and then the people that you're solving those problems for, you need to think about it quite holistically, I think. Yeah. So point 3, I've kind of already mentioned that a little bit, but most must-have problems will have a solution. So how is that happening today? If you really can't think of one, then how are similar problems solved? Is there something that you could learn from a different sector, right? Maybe something, people having problems, I don't know, booking appointments, then which other kind of sector or industry has problems with appointment booking? Can I go and look at how they're managing it over there? And again, doing that kind of level of research is going to give you a wider appreciation, I think. And that kind of leads into understanding the market. So how big is the market? You know, if you're trying to solve something which is for, I don't know, a very rare genetic condition, for example, where there's only a handful of people in the country who have that condition, it may be the right thing to do. And it may be, if you solve a massive problem, then that's brilliant, but it is going to limit and change a lot your plan about how you go about that solution. Whereas if it's something which, I don't know, every person with diabetes can use, for example, then your market size is vastly different, and that's going to have a real knock-on effect in terms of the rest of your model. Impact, super important, right? If you solve that problem, what's going to be the impact of it? And being able to articulate that is a great way to get people excited about what you're trying to do. You know, if I build this and it's successful and it, in my case, reduces post-operative complications by 50%, then I know that on average complications cost this much. I could potentially save this much money for the NHS if everyone is having that operation use my product, right? So starting to think about the market size, impact, and really importantly, competitors. I think before everyone joined, I was telling Polly and Tamsin, one of my pet peeves is when I hear someone chatting about their innovation and they tell me, yeah, no one's done this. This is the first time anyone in the world has solved this problem. And then I go onto Google and within 30 seconds can find a list of people who have already solved that problem and just raised 30 million and they've already made a product. Now, that's not to say you couldn't still go out into that market to make the product, but understand it, right? Understand what other people are doing in that space. Who are your competitors? What are they up to? And even just by going through and doing a bit of research about them, you know, understanding that company's journey can teach you so much, right? You can look at like the evidence that they're generating. You can look at the key features of their solution and so on and so forth. But yeah, really recommend whatever problem you're trying to solve, doing that research and understanding what the landscape looks like. And then finally, again, I won't spend too much time, but just in case some of you are more advanced and already have a lot of these boxes ticked, and you're getting to that stage where you're building something, make sure you design your solution with experts, right? Go out and find subject matter experts who can help guide you and tell you and help you from falling into the same mistakes that that they fell into when they were initially trying to do something similar, and your users. I think that's absolutely key. Going off and designing something in isolation and not engaging with people greatly increases the chance of building something that your users are not going to want. And ultimately, your aim, once you've done all of that research and you understand those things deeply, get to the point you've built something, get a proof of concept, which shows that your solution solves the problem, and then try and get proof of value, which is showing that somebody will dip their hand in the bucket and buy what you've built. Or if it's a not-for-profit, which is, great on the program, somebody's still going to need to fund it, right? So you need to still be able to prove that you're able to secure funding. So I'm going to pause there for a second, I think. Has anyone got any questions so far? I'm going to see if I can see the chat. I think it's mostly people saying hello.
Yeah, we've got a lovely diversity of like everybody doing different parts of medicine, and that's part of you'll find that that's really part of what's great about the clinical entrepreneur program, is that, because just now looking in the chat, we've got psychiatry, GP, hematology, dietitians, occupational therapists, people who are doing entrepreneurship MSCs. So you're doing it's really lovely to see you here. We've got some hands up, Harry.
Yeah, is it in order? John, are you still driving, John? I'm putting your hands up and speaking.
Hello,
Okay,
no, I'm home safely, thank you. Although you can hear my little children about to attack me in the background, so it might be more dangerous.
Completely.
No, thank you for the session, and thank you. Really useful presentation as well. Getting a lot from it. My question, Harry, was about the market research and sort of finding competitors. And I think, if you're anything like me, you have this idea, you think that you're going to change the world overnight. You're the first person to think of it, and then you do that Google search, and your heart sinks because you see other people who are doing something the same or in the same field or something like that. And I just wanted your advice on how you kind of navigate that. Like, obviously, if someone's doing exactly what you're doing, then you don't want to reinvent the wheel. But if you find something that is, in the same ballpark of what you're going to do, but you think actually mine's going to be better or different because of this, I guess how do you navigate that and know whether or not? Because I suppose the other side to that is, if you found that no one had done it, there's probably good evidence that there's not a need for it. So
exactly right.
I'm gonna mute because my daughter's about to shout at me. But yeah, if you don't mind talking about that a bit, please.
Sure, absolutely. And it's really really good question. And I've definitely been there. I remember when I was doing my up, and then I'd see, oh no, there's been something which has been released. I think one of the Darcy fellows or something had done something similar-ish at the London hospital. Important, really, first question to ask yourself is, well, what percentage of the market do they have? Right, what is hello? Is that a crown? That's amazing. What percentage of the market do they have? Right, often if they're a startup, maybe they're really struggling to get penetration themselves. They may have 5 hospitals or something up and running using a product, but that still leaves a lot of the market. I mean, if you decide that I want to build an electronic health record for primary care, maybe that's a bit of a different question, because you've got 2 giant players who have 60 and 40% roughly between them. But in most cases, don't be discouraged. Then be self-critical. You've alluded to it in your question, John, which is what competitive advantage do I have over these people? And then that could be, you've got slightly better tech, right? You've got something which is more efficacious at solving that problem, right? It's better at what it does. You can scale better because, I don't know, they use they're labor intensive and using lots of people, whereas you can automate a bunch of that stuff. So try and identify where you think you can get a competitive advantage. I think that's super important. We try and learn from them, right? Like what have they done? What are they talking about on their website and in all of their marketing stuff that they've put out? It's rare, as they say, in the startup world. There's plenty of competition, and just because somebody's there already, learn from it and do it better. That's a fine route to try and take. But if you really are honest and look at yourself and say, I can't find any reason at all why I have some kind of competitive advantage, and I don't think at the moment I can do it better, then maybe it's time to pivot slightly. And then your final point there, I really like, if it is a must-have problem, there will be some form of solution out there, right? So don't be discouraged necessarily by that, right? But think about it, learn from it, and see where and how you think you can do it better, I guess is the right approach to take.
I think just if I can just add there that also with the programme is looking at you as well. So there's a little bit of the application form that's looking at what you've been able to do in the past, and if you're the sort of, because part of what this programme is that not all of the innovations will work, but everybody here is likely to be leaders in what they're doing and moving forward, and you're probably going to change the culture of what innovations do land in the NHS, even if it's not your own, because we see huge amounts of support from clinical entrepreneurs supporting other clinical entrepreneurs. And so there is just that little extra bit to the form. Harry has obviously spoken about thinking about how you are going to make yourself a little bit more unique and how you are going to place yourself or position yourself. Just to also mention that actually in the programme, we sometimes have people working on the same thing. And firstly, it's an amazing network of people. So we see people learn from that and work out where their special identifying factor is, or we've seen people find each other and be incredibly successful when they join forces. So it depends where you're at. And Polly might even speak to this because she's very good at knowing about all of this, having seen it all the way through. But sometimes people will start with one thing and then they suddenly realise. So in fact, don't you think, Harry, a lot of people pivot in where they're at? A lot of people, it'll be suddenly like, you know, take COVID. Oh, hold on, if I just change my my innovation to address this particular need, or it will address this particular need. And there's this wonderful, I can't remember if it was you, Harry, but someone was saying the other day about how it's, you just keep going at knowing your problem and knowing what the solution needs to be until you get lucky enough for the right thing to arrive at the right time, or the right person to meet the right person. But if you're on a program that's incredibly supportive, that's growing you as a person, that's helping you think about your innovation so that you can kind of really get it out there. And it doesn't matter if you pivot massively or you suddenly realize this next thing is the best bit, because we sometimes see that. Now, saying that, you do have to apply with one problem. We do want you to focus, but we understand that people on the program will sometimes pivot depending on what they've got going on.
Yeah, really good points, Tamsin. And I guess you kind of alluded to it a bit there, but just being curious, right? Being open to new information and being curious to find out. So all of these things which are on here, asking why is that the case? Why is this a problem for people? Why are they solving it like that, right? And constantly doing that. And in the case of market research, you know, how are these guys over here doing it? Why, you know, how could we improve upon the way that they're running it? And stumbling across the right person or the right connection or the right opportunity, or the right piece of insight, right? And that insight will only be generated by doing that research, and that you'll suddenly get a light bulb and like, if only I did it like this. Or maybe I'm going to solve a slightly different problem than what I thought it was. But if I do, this in this way, then that could be the way forward. Okay, Michael.
Thank you so much, Harry and Tamsin. Really appreciate your time in doing this. My question was just about if your innovation would require cooperation from the current kind of like the electronic patient records organizations. So let's say you wanted to do something with the data that would be valuable, but it would need cooperation. Would that be kind of, would that be held against it in the application because it's kind of like very provisional on them allowing you access to it? And second question, what happens with equity and IP if we do this while we're employed by the NHS? Thank you.
Yeah, good questions.
Very good questions.
I know I need to channel my inner Tony Young now, which is a dangerous thing to do. You have to tell us what you do and where you are, Michael. And I should have made John do this too. But...
Oh yeah, sure. So I'm a psychiatry or just CT3, just about to enter reg training, and I have an interest in kind of comp sci AI, machine learning, and wanting to kind of apply some of those recent advances to create this kind of like AI-based future NHS that's in the government plans. But just not sure whether we can. Well, just not sure how to gain cooperation from the current players in the field.
Yeah. So in terms of that as a route to market, it's a challenge, right? Getting some of the bigger current players to play nicely and allow access to the data is a challenge. But if you're entrepreneurial and you're scrappy, there's always ways to get your hands on data sets through legal and compliant means. I mean that sounded really dodgy. That's not what I meant. But there are big research data sets, for example. There's not all data is held in the hands of third-party vendors, so it's usually possible. But I guess my suggestion would be: is it possible to validate your problem in some way, or your solution in some way, without having full access to the third-party vendors' data? And almost certainly the answer to that is yes, right? There will be a way that you can get hands on the data set. You can also still do that research, right? And if it's really super compelling, if this is successful and I were to solve this problem, this is what the impact would be. It could change millions of people's lives, or it could save this much money, or whatever it is. You can still research that. So I want to say, in fact, Tamsin, maybe you say, I don't think we would discount an innovation because of that, right? But think about ways around it, and again, understand the problem that you're trying to solve. But Tamsin, maybe you kind of comment.
Yeah, no, Michael, well done for going for something that is a priority for the NHS. That's fantastic. And yes, those sort of things, so which is lovely to mention. So we do have mentors on the programme, very high quality mentors that have all been assessed, and it's one of the things that people, when they're giving feedback about the programme, say is one of the best things, because we might be able to connect you to someone who's been in this area particularly. There's also partnerships with the clinical entrepreneur programme. So for example, we have a partnership with IBM and other very high high players who would be able to really navigate you through this and think about opportunities with you. And we always do at least one day in IBM, actually, because they have got all their quantum computers, they've got a lot of virtual reality, they've got a robot dog, they're doing a lot in that space, and they're supporting a lot of our clinical entrepreneurs. So this kind of innovation is something that we can see is moving forward, we can support, and there are nice partnerships that that help within the programme. So I would suggest that it would probably work well, but as Harry says, all of those bits are great to think about first when you're applying, just to make sure you've got a strong application. Yeah. But amazing that you're, were you a site cred? Is that right, Michael?
Yeah, well, I'm just in my last week as a CT3 and about to start my reg posts in 2 weeks.
What made, sorry, I now want to ask you a million questions. What made you think of it? Quick, yeah, tell me, what made you think of all of this? You've just been interested in it forever, have you? Or...
Oh yeah, I'm super into kind of like software engineering, and like before this, me and a friend were already thinking about something in this area. Yeah, so sorry, Harry, just to quickly follow up on what your suggestion of pre-validating it. So it would strengthen the application if we already, let's say, found some kind of like public sample data, and we're able to show, we're able to generate the thing we want to create with this. And that we validated somehow, maybe talking to people who use it, and they've said that's helpful. That would really strengthen the application.
Definitely, right? That shows that you're proactively thinking about how you would tangibly take this forward, right? And that's great. Like I say, we're not. I think the program, we take people at all different stages. So sometimes it is just an idea. But the more that you can do, right, the stronger, the more that you can demonstrate that you're really serious about this and you really understand the problem that you're trying to solve, the better, right? And just to pick up on the second half of your question around IP, Polly's put in the chat there, but just to be crystal clear for everyone, Clinical Entrepreneur Program never takes any IP from the innovations which developed, and no equity or anything like that. But as Polly's quite rightly said, you may need to have conversations with your local trust. I think sometimes we try and help navigate people through some of those conversations and try and support with them, but you may need to have a conversation with your employer. But certainly from the program's perspective, we don't take it ever.
Thank you so much.
Okay, there's another hand, and I'm so sorry, I'm gonna do a terrible job of your name. Giolito, I want to say.
Giolito. Don't worry, it's not the first time.
What do you do? Where are you from?
I'm actually a nurse by background, an internationally educated nurse, originally from the Philippines, but I've been in UK for the last 23 years. So that did my adaptation, and now I'm also a biologist and have undergoing PhD for digital health. But my question is not your definition of innovation, because I'm thinking of computing building, that's what I'm hearing at the moment. But for the clinical entrepreneur, I don't intend to build a software, neither, or any electronic. It might include electronic patient record, but I'm intending to collaborate and address one of the global problems that we have to align with the NHS strategies for the next 5-10 years, or maybe even global. Only because we already have that kind of services elsewhere abroad, and I'm trying to link it here in UK. So with our limitations at the moment with staff, workforces, that's my idea. Having said that, it's not a bad idea to build a software, because we really need that for the data security. But I understand how long it takes to build something from scratch. So my idea is not novel. It's outside, it's very competitive, but I'm worried it might not be chosen in the program because it's provided with multiple services. We are one of them, but it's not available in UK.
Okay, so yeah, definitely program takes a whole range of different ideas, and that can be nothing to do with software at all. That's 100% fine.
Thank you, that's reassuring.
It can be pure service company. It can include some software. It can be hardware, right? Some sort of medical device, or like but it's still, I guess what we're looking for is things that can have significant impact and improve things for the NHS, its staff, and the people that we look after, right? And that's the broadest umbrella that we can have. So something that's going to make a positive, tangible impact to people's lives. So definitely be reassured. I like the idea, if something's working really effectively in a different country or a different
Yeah, it's transferable.
and you bring it here, and that there sounds to me like there'd be some really good evidence and research. This is the impact it's had over here. If we could do X, Y, and Z, we can bring that over here into this country. But then that gives you your market research, right? You know, presumably the evidence and things of impact in where it's already set up. Then maybe you can show what the impact is.
Yeah, but I've considered this about ages ago, about 5 years ago, but I'm worried. I'm a clinician, I'm a nurse. I'm worried about my license, my PIN. No one supports clinical professionals doing ethically. It feels vague for me at that time. I was in a limbo in a dilemma, and I'm so glad that I found you. So yeah, finally.
That's literally what we're here for. That's genuinely what we want to do. Take like clinical people, healthcare professionals. I mean, you see the problems, right? You feel the problems, you experience them. If you found like, oh, if we could just do this, right? If we could just solve this problem, that's what we're here to try and help and support. And you know, some people do complete not-for-profit, some people do social enterprises, some people do full-on for-profit. I mean, we'd never really want to back someone who's doing something blatantly unethical, right? And that's not what we're here for.
Yeah.
But if it's going to help people, and you end up making a profit out of the back of it, that's fine, right?
And we do combine, because actually I've designed everything, because it's been on my head for years. And now that I've attended the previous introduction, it's going into different work stream already. But I understand what Tamsin said, that it has to be focused first. So I'm narrowing it down.
I mean, it's difficult without knowing the ins and outs, but I'll give you as a general principle, pick your number one problem ideally. And then in terms of your solution, which you're trying to pitch in terms of your, you know, your application, pick the one bit of your solution which solves that one problem, right? Focus in on that, start there, and then who knows what that could develop into. But to bring that focus, right? Here's the number one problem, which if I solve it will have the biggest impact. Here's the number one feature of my solution, my service, which is going to solve that problem. And if it works, this is the impact that we could have. That would be my advice, if that's helpful.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And Kalita, we've got a lot of successful nurses. I mean, to have nurses who are frontline, who are thinking enough about what the NHS needs to improve, are total superheroes on the programme. They're hugely, you know, we have hugely benefited from a vast array of different specialties on the programme. To bring in something that has worked in another country or somewhere else, it is often a very nice approach. So you would be hugely welcome to apply. I think you'd enjoy having that camaraderie, because what you explained there about feeling a bit alone with your problem is something that's almost universal. Like, because you're in the NHS, no one's that interested, because they just want you to see more patients, rather than, as you say, they're not really focusing on you thinking about something innovative. That's absolutely what we're interested in. We want people like you who are interested in not just your clinical problem, but what you could do for everybody else. And we have some people who really think sort of outside and what they want to adopt sort of entrepreneurially, and we have some what we describe as intrapreneurs, which is just people who can see within their system that they could change something, or a program, or a device, or a wearable, or whatever it is, or something, an app on their mobile phone, or whatever it is. But those but those do well as well on the program. So we have the ones that want to sell big and really change the whole system, and people who want to change sort of a small section of the system. But actually we found that lots of people who are doing something entrepreneurially within their own NHS trust say that they actually end up thinking bigger once they get on the program.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The art of the possible. Okay, I'll take one more question, and then I've got just a couple of kind of summary slides that we'll go through. So, Umair.
Thank you very much, Tamsin and Harry, and for organising, and Polly in the background. I just wanted to ask a question about go-to-market strategy. So, if we sort of pitch the idea that we will go to another market first in another country, sort of to validate it, and it'd be sort of lower barriers to entry, and then come to the NHS, is that something acceptable within the NHS clinical entrepreneurship program?
Good question. And Umair, what do you do and where are you from?
So I'm a hematology registrar based in Liverpool. So I'm basically working on, again, I think we have some common themes here about AI and things like that. So I'm quite interested in that as well.
Yeah. So nice to meet you. And to answer your question, I think basically, and Tamsin and Polly can tell me if I'm getting this wrong, but my understanding is that so long as there is the potential for benefit to the NHS at some point in your journey, and again, benefiting could be the NHS as a whole, it could be NHS staff, it could be patients that we look after, then that's what we're looking for. If you say, I want to go and get proof of concept in country X, and once we really validate it, then we're going to try and raise some funding, and then we're going to try and do it back in the NHS, I would think that would be fine. I'm looking at Tamsin and Polly.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that I think there are other people who have validated outside the UK or validated inside the UK and then gone to do a larger study outside the UK. So definitely had those type of models. There are a lot of people who, once they get very mature with their innovation, are absolutely looking to go internationally. So we welcome those links. We can, in some cases, we can facilitate those links.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do have links. I think Finland got some links. Australia, we're doing something.
Australia, there was a we recently had, was it Polly, in a hospital in Israel who was collaborating, and I benefited myself from Tony bringing me on an Australian. They were looking at if it was a Department of Trade and thinking about innovations that could be shared between Australia and the UK. So, and there's a lot of this year there was a trip to the US for clinical entrepreneurs who aligned with where they were visiting in the US. So yeah, absolutely expecting thinking, international thinking. As Harry absolutely says, obviously the focus is for the NHS who are paying for this programme, that we will improve the life for NHS patients. But of course we expect people to go abroad. And actually there's, part of me thinks that, maybe there's a bit of a responsibility to think of that as well. If we have an innovation, then, there should be some sharing, because we can benefit more people.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't used to think that big, by the way. If anybody else is thinking, oh my gosh, I've got some tiny little idea, I had no clue when I first arrived. I just had, I was trying to put something together and I felt completely alone. And, it was only once I got onto the programme and everybody's talking about doing stuff in other countries that, I didn't even think it would be possible. And now I have done that, but it was, that don't worry if you're feeling like, oh, everybody's got these amazing ideas and talking about AI, because actually part of the program we think about AI. We offer, it's not just about, so you get these lovely education sessions for 2 days almost every month. I think it's about 10 times over the year. But then we also throw in these webinars where you can catch up with certain things that you might need to think about. And the AI might be one of those. So we are currently totally aware of how much AI is being included in people's innovations. And so there have become some educational opportunities for people who know less about it, and some mentoring opportunities, or maybe some partnering opportunities for people who are a bit more established. So yeah, don't worry if you're feeling that you're at one end of the spectrum or not. Yeah.
Thanks, Tamsin. So I was going to come back. I've got a couple more slides, but I'm going to go whiz through them because I'm conscious that some people might have to drop off. So refresher on the lean canvas. I say you don't need to know everything, but do know about your problem, do know about your customers, do know about your solution, and do know about the existing alternatives. They're the bits that I really pick out. Not going to spend too long on this slide, but this is the one which I wanted to just talk about a little bit. So all of that stuff that we've talked about, how do you actually then turn it into some action? So start thinking about those hypotheses that you can write, right? Often your first one is this group of people, X, has this problem, Y, caused by this situation, right? That can be your first hypothesis. There's going to be many more that you can write, right? Like I can solve problem Y with this solution, right? Customer X is solving problem Y with this other solution at the moment, right? Start thinking about those research questions, which can then drive your activity. Best way to start is to speak to people a lot, right? That's your users, that's other people who are in the industry, that's your customers. Don't do what I definitely did, and I know many entrepreneurs do, like, I've got to keep all my ideas secret and not speak to people. Get out the door and speak to people. Definitely speak to the people who you think are having that problem, and really understand what they actually feel and what they actually think, and is that the biggest problem that they have? And think about different methods to do that. There's Running Lean has some really good advice on that, about semi-structured interviews. So ask an open question and then don't lead people into the answers that you already think are true, because people will pick up on it, but structure maybe your conversations with people in a way to elicit real honest information if you can. And then that's true throughout your entire journey, and definitely if you're successful in the program, it's even more true, right? And go and find out what other people are doing, what mistakes have they made, what do they think about what you're trying to do. If they've got any advice, is there anyone that they could introduce you to, who you could speak to, right? Really, really important. Online research, as I said, don't be that person who hasn't Googled their own idea, right? You do it, go online, have a look around, have a look at any of the health tech news type websites. There's loads out there. Have a look around about the problem that you're trying to solve, and try and do a bit of a deep dive on it. If you're looking at companies, you try and do your market research. Recommend Crunchbase if you haven't seen that before. Really good site, tells you about all of their funding and who funded it, and all of the news related to a particular company. Have a little read and a dig through there, and you can start to understand people's journeys, which can then really help you inform yours. Often literature search is super useful. Like, what is the evidence around your problem in particular? So for me, going back to my myop thing, what was the evidence for various different interventions aimed at reducing post-operative complications? So I found loads of stuff around active cycle breathing technique and preoperative nutrition and exercise programs, and which were the most effective exercise programs at getting the biggest impact. All of that you can start pulling in, and again, it goes to understanding your problem and understanding the solution that you're trying to build. So do that research, really, really helpful. If you're a bit further along, start prototyping and building an MVP. Just really quickly to go back to this, MVP is the simplest thing that you can build to test your assumption. I think that's the best way to think about it. In many cases, that can be a PowerPoint presentation where you say, I want to do this, I think it's going to solve this problem, and this is the way I'm going to do it. Take that out, send it to people, get feedback on it, and speak to people using that, I think. And as I said before, be curious, right? Build something, write a hypothesis, build something to test it, take it out there, test it somehow, learn from it, come back again, and then see where you are. Go as you work through your list of assumptions, you'll get to that point of insight, which is then when you can really start having a massive impact, I think. Final slide. Oh, I'll go the wrong way. Yeah, I saw this from John Spindler, who's one of the amazing mentors on the program, but I noticed he referenced it in one of his talks, and I really like it. So if the lean startup's a bit beyond you and you just want something more simple, this is from Heilmeyer, who was a director of DARPA in the 70s, I think, and they still use it today whenever they're assessing any new research program or product or initiative that they're thinking about supporting. Ask yourselves these questions. If you can answer all of these questions, it's going to go a long way to helping your application. What are you trying to do in layman's terms? How is it done today? What are the limits of that current practice? So what's the existing alternatives? To John's point earlier, what's your competitive advantage? So yeah, what's new in your approach? Why would it be successful? What will the impact be? What are the risks? The bottom ones, how much will it cost? How long will it take? You may not know yet. That's okay. Maybe having some thoughts about it though at this stage could be a good idea. And the bottom one, put down to lean startup speak. What's your proof of concept? What's your proof of value? I think that was it. I just leave this quote. I always finish on this quote. It's a good one. Don't get disheartened. I've not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Next one might be the one. Okay, so that's enough of death by PowerPoint. I know we're a little bit over. I'm okay for another 10-15 minutes or so. If people have got any further questions, anything else anyone wants to ask, feel free. Safe space. We're very friendly.
Yes, we're welcome to stay on for another 10 minutes, but also Polly's just put in the chat that of course we've got another preparation session on the 6th of September and the applications open in October. If you're not sure whether to apply, then apply. It's definitely the best thing that I've done, and I think it's feeling like all of those bits that you are ploughing on with on your own, or all those bits that you're not sure if you value, are probably very valued on this program. And we would we've got a website, but once you get onto the program, then we invite you to be part of this lovely kind of online community hub, which has got lots of information on it as well. But in the meantime, check out our website. And we're also on the sort of usual social media channels. So definitely sort of sign up, and that would be lovely. And we've also got resources online that explain the application process. And actually some of that will include things like how to answer certain questions and what we're looking for in certain ways. But it's the applications actually go through they tend to go through around 3 different people, and it's often someone in the entrepreneurial space, someone in the clinical space, someone in the commercial space. And so it'll be scored by all of those people. But we are really looking for people doing all sorts of things, mature or early stage. And we're really interested in having that diversity of applications across different specialties, different cultures. So we'd love that.
Maybe it's a bit of a final thought. Like you've alluded to it there, Tamsin, like the program's been amazing for me personally. I've met so many amazing people, so many opportunities from it. But the most common bit of feedback that I hear from people who join, like, I finally found my tribe. Right? I found those people who think a little bit differently and are excited by changing things and improving things and not happy with the status quo, right? Find a group of 1,000 healthcare professionals who are all like-minded is a pretty amazing thing and pretty unique globally. I'm not sure anywhere else in the world has anything quite the same. Any final questions? Don't be shy.
Yeah, any questions about the program, then you're welcome to put up your hand or open up your mic or put it in the chat. We're really happy to just. Oh, Uma, did you want to?
Yes, sorry, just a question about the application process. So, you know, I guess there's a video pitch and there's a application form, but if you sort of, is there like a stepwise progression? So you get invited to an interview if you're successful, or is there no interview in this process?
I think, Harry, you and I both had interviews, didn't we?
You too. Yeah.
And so they did used to have in-person interviews in London, and actually, of course, since COVID, but also since the programme has grown. So they've had the most on the programme that they've had last year. And so part of that is to streamline the application process. So it's mostly about the form, and there is a 1-minute pitch. Tony Young, who's the National Clinical Lead for Innovation and also Medical Director at his hospital, he tries to look at every single pitch. It will also go through 3 people who will assess your application. So it's 10 now, it's kind of much more streamlined. All of that's uploaded, and then you'll hear an outcome at the end of that. And we have had people who have applied, so who didn't go on 1 year and then applied the following year. So it's very open, and we are really interested in not just the innovation, but there's kind of a bit about what your ambitions are and what you've been able to change in the past. So there's a couple of questions on that. So sometimes, because there is this feeling that you as a person are very important, because it's a workforce development program, and we've already been able to see the difference that people going back out and understanding changes the way that the innovation culture has been seen in the NHS. It's helped probably a little bit by COVID. So yeah, those points, and I think it's probably one of those things that's worth throwing your hat in the ring for it. Even if when you get there you completely pivot and change, that's okay, don't panic about that.
Just to add on to what Tamsin was saying about the application process. So as Tamsin said, applications are assessed by 3 assessors, but there's also quite a lot of rigor around it. So all applications are assessed by and validated by a panel. Sorry, my cat's joining in. So it's quite a long process. So after the first assessment, sorry, the cat is now it's distracting me, sorry. So after it's been through the initial assessors, then there's panels that are comprised of people from NHS England and our team, just to check through and make sure the decision that's been made is correct. So if the people are on the programme or unsuccessful, and then we do provide comprehensive feedback if you ask for it, for your in writing after, if you're unsuccessful. So we do try to encourage you that if you're not successful in your first attempt, to try again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. After doing some research, maybe. Cool.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, great question.
Okay, any more? There's no silly questions.
You're very welcome to be completely entrepreneurial and just say hi if you want to. At this point.
Say hello, that's awesome.
But if you all need to have an evening, that is also fine.
I'll come in if I may.
Sure.
Thank you again, really useful presentation. And lots of actionable things to work on in the run up to the application. The stage that I'm at the moment is I'm going out to people who, I suppose the last one on your list, I'm going out to experts in the field to try to build my network and build contacts and find people who ultimately will be able to mentor me in the aspects of the product development that I don't have any knowledge in. And that's all very new to me. I don't think it's a skill we really get taught in medicine at all, networking or building connections or relationships. My experience is, you just go into the team you're in and you probably work with a different set of people every day. And as Tamsin always says, it's just about seeing the next patient. So I feel sort of, I've been fumbling through doing it and, reaching out to people and finding what works and what doesn't, and now have some good meetings set up with some important people in the field that I'm now sort of starting to feel a bit, now I've got over the line of actually getting the meetings set up. The next stage is getting, as Tony always says, what's the outcome I want from that meeting and how do I go about getting it? And I just wondered if you have any advice on doing that when you're going cold, someone who's giving you 20 minutes of their time over coffee, how you go in without overwhelming them and seeming like a over enthusiastic that you're going to change the world, but also trying to get them fired up and excited. And then at that stage, what do you ask for? Do you say at that stage, like, I'd really love your mentorship in this, or is that coming on too bold and too forward? Any sort of experience around that from any of you would be fantastic, please.
Well, so actually my thoughts, I guess, which is have a growth mindset. And I don't know, there's a book I keep recommending to people called Mindset by Carol Dweck, which is a really good way to just leave your ego at the door, be super curious. Everything's a learning opportunity. And just don't go in there trying to impress them. Go in there and say, look, this is where I'm at. I would love to learn from you. What do you think about this? And if they're passionate about your problem, which they probably are if they're already an expert, they're going to be really excited to talk and to ask lots of questions. And I think being relatively straightforward and honest about it, like, look, I'm so grateful for your time. I would love to pick your brain some more. Is there any chance that we could have another follow-on call? I mean, I think that's completely fine thing to ask, and just start building that relationship. But again, going back to some of the stuff I covered in my talk, like, what hypothesis are you trying to validate or disprove in that meeting? Like, oh, I think this is the case. What do you think about this? Right? I think that if we do this, it will help us to solve this problem. Like, what are your views on it? And that's going to help you then to get more from the meeting, because it's progressing your knowledge about your problem and your solution going forward, right? So structuring it around what assumptions you want to test, being super honest and open and just curious and genuine with them, I think is the best approach. I suppose just being vulnerable, like, I really struggled with that when I first came out of medicine. I struggle with a lot less now, as you might be able to tell. And I think the reason I struggled is we're quite often told as doctors that, like, you want to always be the smartest, the best. You don't want to show that you don't really know the answer. Whereas in the entrepreneurial world, there's time and a place for being, self-aggrandizing, I suppose. But particularly in that networking setting, just take your ego out of it and to speak with passion about the problem you're trying to solve. And that's it. That'd be my advice.
Warm introductions are quite helpful if you know someone who knows someone. It helps to be on the clinical entrepreneur program once you get on there, because it helps to be able to say, hi, I'm on the clinical entrepreneur program, or you're a clinical entrepreneur like me, and that makes things, it helps that people see you as being the same. But warm introductions are often easier if you can find someone who can introduce you or ask people. And then asking people for advice, like Harry said, just being open and asking people for their advice. Often when people are really passionate about their subject, like Harry just said, they are delighted that you would ask for their advice about that.
Yeah, I think, thank you. I think that's really, you've both hit the nail on the head, actually, and really, I suppose that's exactly what I felt, really, was that I feel quite a lot of pressure, because there is this, you have to be the expert with all of the answers. So I've got one shot to prove how fabulous I am to get them on board. But no, that idea of actually just going there and genuinely asking for, this is where I am, I need your help. It seems so obvious when you say it, but it's certainly it's not the way I've been experienced medicine. So thank you. If you that growth mindset, there's a YouTube podcast called the Huberman Lab, which had a whole sort of 3-hour podcast on it on Monday, which you might like. So
what's it called?
The Huberman Lab. He's a Stanford neuroscientist.
I'll look it up.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Should we call to a close then? I think ready for some dinner. Cool.
Thank you so much, everybody. It's really helpful, Harry, to go through all of that. Thank you.
No worries at all.
It was really helpful.
I'll say one final thing. There's only one person with such a stupid name on LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to connect, I'm always happy to have a chat. I'll leave with that. Thanks, everybody.
Might take you up on that, Harry. Thank you so much.
I'll keep that too. Thank you.
Thanks all. Thank you. Bye-bye.